Morning all. 10,000 nurses in England, Wales and Northern Ireland are on strike in a dispute over pay and conditions. It is the second walkout in less than a week, and ambulance staff are due to follow them tomorrow. The Health Secretary is meeting unions this morning, but the government says it won't talk about pay. Sky's Ivor Bennett reports.
No strikes for over 100 years, and now 2 within a week. The party atmosphere of the picket lines concealing anger and exhaustion. Staff nurse Sean Williams will be striking at Birmingham's Queen Elizabeth Hospital, where the fundamental issue for him is patient care.
It's not a pleasant environment to be. You train as a nurse and you practice as a nurse, wanting to give the best care and treatment you can, and when you can't do that, it's soul destroying.
So patients are already suffering?
They are, yes, yeah. And
to what extent?
To what extent? The care's not getting done and care's being missed.
And now even more care will be missed, or at least postponed. Last week's walkout resulted in 16,000 appointments being cancelled. Anyone who comes to hospital for an emergency will still be seen, with all critical care units remaining operational. But the strike means there will be thousands of patients up and down the country who will have appointments and surgeries cancelled, and the disruption is unlikely to end here. That's because negotiations with the government are deadlocked over pay, and the nurses' union is now threatening to repeat these scenes next year for up to 6 months.
If that's what we need to do, then that's what we will continue. But we really do not want to have to escalate the size of the strikes, the numbers of members that we take on strike at any one time. But all of these are things that we'll need to consider if the government doesn't take it seriously.
And it seems the government's now under pressure from elsewhere too.
The damage that you're doing to families like myself is terrible.
The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, was publicly rebuked on a hospital visit yesterday by this mother of a 3-year-old patient who'd had her treatment delayed.
We have some brilliant experts, and they're being worked to the bone, and actually the level of care they provide is amazing, but they're not being able to provide it in the way they want to provide it because the resourcing is not there.
But when it comes to nurses' pay, that's exactly what the government says, that the resources aren't there. So for now, it's a face-off in which neither side is blinking. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Birmingham.
Well, there will be picket lines at hospitals across the country today. One of those will be at St Thomas's Hospital in central London. Our correspondent, Sadia Chowdhury, will be there throughout the morning. Sadia, I suspect not much action there just now, but going by the last time the striking was there will be lots and lots of nurses behind you.
Yes, it's fairly quiet now, and look, it is the run-up to Christmas, but actually nursing is one of those professions, isn't it, that it doesn't really matter what date of the year it is likely to have an impact when nurses walk out, and that is set to happen today as 10,000 nurses across England, Wales and Northern Ireland will walk out. The NHS is due to run a bank holiday-style service today. That means that some procedures and operations will get cancelled or rescheduled, but critical care units, dialysis, things like chemotherapy, paediatric intensive care, those departments are still set to be staffed by nursing, but it will have inevitably an impact on the public. But the Royal College of Nursing says that it has the public on its side as it launches this second day of action. Of course, the last one was last Thursday on the 15th of December. There is set to be a picket line here from about 7:30 onwards. It is still fairly quiet here this morning, but we expect there to be lots of people, as you say, as last time we saw how many people turned up for that picket line. And it's then a chance for us to hear from nurses about what they really want, and I suspect they'll tell us that it's all about pay because they want the pay increase. The government saying that it's simply unaffordable at this time, but the Royal College of Nursing has given the government up to 48 hours after today's strike action ends to come up with a response. Otherwise, it says it has the mandate to continue these strikes into 2023 and for another 6 months.
Sadia, thank you. Well, let's just remind you of all the strikes that are taking place over the coming days, and there's more than a couple of them, as we've been hearing. Members of the Royal College of Nursing in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, they will be walking out for a second time today. Ambulance staff, including paramedics, emergency care assistants, call handlers, they will be striking on the 21st and the 28th. Postal workers will stage another two-day strike from the 23rd of December. Border Force staff, they'll be walking off the job from the 23rd to the 26th, and then again from the 28th to the 31st. There will also be 4 more days of rail walkouts around Christmas. Joining us now, our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen. Good to see you again this morning, TC. This one could run and run, couldn't it? You look at the rhetoric that we're hearing from Rishi Sunak, you look at the rhetoric and the mandate that the Royal College of Nurses have, and this could last well into the new year.
Certainly the nurses are already threatening that it will last well into the new year if there is no resolution, and it was pretty clear last night that there wasn't going to be one. I think ministers' concerns are now turning to the ambulance strike tomorrow, with both the paramedics and 999 call handlers striking for the first time in 30 years at a number of ambulance trusts in England and Wales, and exactly which calls they will be responding to. Today, Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, has called in representatives from the 3 unions representing those ambulance workers, Unite, Unison and GMB, to a meeting around lunchtime to discuss exactly what are these life and limb emergencies, because we know that ambulances will be still responding to Category 1 calls, so immediate threat to life, but Category 2 calls, which can include heart attacks, strokes, major burns, may not get a response or a very quick response. So ministers are very concerned about what that might mean and want to discuss it with the unions today, although they're supposed to be hammering it out with each individual trust. As for how long this all might last, well, Rishi Sunak's given an interview to the Daily Mail today saying that he is willing to fight on against the strikers. He doesn't want to give in on public sector pay, which he says fuels inflation. But he also uses that interview to set out his political vision, Sunakism, if you like, and the NHS is crucial to it. I'll read you a bit of what he says in that interview. He says, "The first thing I want to deliver for people is peace of mind. Peace of mind is about knowing that public services like the NHS are going to be there for you and your family when you need them, which is why we are focusing on getting waiting lists down." Of course, getting waiting lists down made a lot more difficult by the threat of strikes, especially if they go on for a very long time.
Indeed. Tamara, thank you. Of course, the strikes dominating this morning's front pages. We begin with the Express, which carries a call from the Nurses' Union for the Prime Minister to get personally involved in pay negotiations. But in an interview with the Mail, Rishi Sunak describes the Royal College of Nursing's pay demands as unreasonable. The resulting disruption from both strikes and the pleas to call them off, that is the main focus for the Telegraph. But the Metro, I should say, chooses to lead with the mother of a seriously ill 3-year-old who confronted the Health Secretary in a hospital yesterday. Here's the FT. It's reporting that the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, will meet ambulance unions to discuss how they'll handle emergency cover when they walk out tomorrow. The Guardian is carrying a warning from NHS leaders that the ambulance strike threatens the lives of 999 patients. The Times reports that heart attack patients won't necessarily be sent ambulances. The Eye says the same is true of stroke victims. According to The Sun, would-be ambulance users are being advised to take taxis instead. And we will be speaking to the Health Minister, Will Quince, at around about 20 past, and the leader of Unite the Union, Sharon Graham, just after 8 o'clock. Stay tuned for both of those. But we turn to the United States, where a congressional committee has unanimously called for criminal charges to be brought against Donald Trump over his role in the Capitol riots. His supporters stormed Congress on January the 6th, 2021, to try and stop Joe Biden from being certified as president. Our US correspondent James Matthews reports.
Those in favour say aye.
Aye. With one voice, they shared a damning conclusion. This congressional committee had brought us Insurrection, an Inside Story.
We need to hold the doors of the Capitol.
In the end, it pointed the finger at its principal actor.
I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
Donald Trump, they said, should be charged with at least 4 offences, including inciting or assisting an insurrection.
The president has an affirmative and primary constitutional duty to act to take care that the laws be faithfully executed, Nothing could be a greater betrayal of this duty than to assist in insurrection against the constitutional order.
Oh my gosh, they're just breaking windows.
These committee hearings had used evidence previously unseen and unheard to paint a picture of the violence and chaos that was January the 6th. And there was testimony from the team around Trump. They spoke of his claims of a rigged election.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bull.
There was on-the-day encouragement to the mob.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
There was little sympathy as rioters chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," as the Vice President tried to certify the election for Joe Biden.
Mark had responded something to the effect of, "You heard him, Pat. He thinks Mike deserves it. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong."
This committee has put Donald Trump firmly in the frame, if not in the dock. It's not for them to press charges. They're politicians. That's beyond their power. But the recommendations have gone to this country's Department of Justice.
He is unfit for any office.
Trump's initial response was for the committee vice chair Liz Cheney, a reminder of her 40-point defeat in a Republican primary. It's all politics. For now. James Matthews, Sky News, Washington.
The disgraced Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein has been found guilty of rape in a trial in Los Angeles. The 70-year-old is already 2 years into a 23-year sentence for a different conviction in New York. It was those allegations against him that ignited the MeToo movement. The Sky's Nick Qureshi reports.
Beyond the palm trees in the luxury of this five-star hotel and others across Los Angeles, Harvey Weinstein ruined lives.
Any comment, Harvey?
The former film producer was found guilty of rape, the second conviction after he was sent to jail in New York 2 years ago. Four women, all known as Jane Doe to protect their anonymity, took the stand with similar stories, each, though, uniquely devastating. The first, a model and actor, was bent over a sink and raped. "I wanted to die," she said. "I remember how he was looking in the mirror and he was telling me to look at him." "I've never seen a big guy like that naked," testified Jane Doe too. "I was really frail and he was a really big man." Survivor Rowena Chu was a former assistant to Weinstein. She says he assaulted her at the Venice Film Festival.
It's a pretty terrifying experience. Being a rabbit in a cage with a tiger wouldn't go amiss, I suppose. I feel like you have very little power, obviously.
It's 5 years now since the first allegations against Weinstein were made public, breaking a generations-long culture of silence and beginning the Me Too era. It's a movement which has spread to workplaces around the world. Although the jury couldn't reach a unanimous guilty verdict on all claims, these dark secrets now brought into the light will ensure Harvey Weinstein is never released from prison. Nick Qureshi, Sky News.
But let's return to our top story. The second walkout by thousands of nurses in less than a week over pay and conditions. Let's speak to the Health Minister, Will Quince, joining us from Westminster. Very good morning to you, Mr Quince. Of course, it's not just the nurses striking. We have a pending ambulance strike as well, which does rather beg the question, taken together, is there a risk to life if these strikes go ahead? Could people die as a result?
Well, good morning. We are putting all necessary derogations, working with the unions and individual trusts to make sure that there are minimum service levels, both at ambulance trust level and indeed at hospital trust level, to ensure patient safety. It's my number one priority. I know it's the number one priority of NHS staff. I hope it is also the number one priority of unions. Those conversations are ongoing with ambulance trusts and unions, and I know the Secretary of State and I have meetings with unions later today to firm that up.
Sure, but if they're not attending Category 2 calls, which is the implication in parts of the country, that minimum service level may not be sufficient. So I will ask the question again.
Well, let me be absolutely clear. Let me be absolutely clear on that. Our expectation is that Category 1 and Category 2 calls are covered. They are considered to be life-threatening or emergency calls. And my call to the union, as I will repeat later today, is that Category 1 and Category 2 calls, which make up around 50% of all calls to the ambulance service, should be covered as part of derogations.
The complaint on the part of specifically the paramedics is that people are currently dying as a result of a service that is overstretched. I mean, Unite the Union, admittedly not your favourite people in the world, but through a Freedom of Information request, they discovered that the West Midlands Ambulance Trust has seen an absolutely staggering increase in patient deaths. Nothing to do with the trust. In 2020, according to official figures, 1 patient died. In this year till September, 37 people have died because of ambulance delays. I mean, the paramedics have a point, don't they?
So, look, at the moment, the service is below where we would hope and expect it to be. In part, that's pandemic-driven. It's largely not down to the ambulance trust itself, but issues actually with bed occupancy and discharge within hospitals. That's why we've put an extra £500 million into discharge this winter, opening up an extra 7,000 beds. But on these issues, my door and the door of the Secretary of State is open. We want to discuss these with the unions. I'm having further conversations with them later today. But these are not issues relating to pay, which is the main issue that is driving the conversations on behalf of the unions. Now, anything with regards to patient
with tens of thousands of places, of posts unoccupied, unfilled within the health service, I gently suggest that perhaps pay does have something to do with it.
Well, you specifically asked about paramedics. Paramedics, we have an extra 3,000 last year, another 3,000 being recruited this year. We have 40% more paramedics and ambulance staff compared to 2010. The issue is actually within hospital trusts, and we are putting the resource in to address that, to ensure that the handover times within hospitals come down, so ambulances can get back out on the road. That is not an issue specific when it comes to ambulance trusts and pay.
But the critical incident declared by the Ambulance Trust in the North East, because because of the understaffing levels, that presumably doesn't fall under what you were just describing there.
So the largest issue is around handover delays, and that is largely about bed occupancy levels within hospitals, flow within hospitals, and discharge into adult social care. They are all issues that we are tackling, but we're also building up resilience within the Ambulance Trust too. An extra £150 million, an extra £20 million. Invested in the fleet. And as I say, we are investing in more paramedics too. And my door and the door of the Secretary of State is open when it comes to discussing those issues around patient safety and working conditions for staff. What we are not willing to negotiate is reopening the pay for this year, which is part of the independent pay review body recommendations, which the government accepted in full.
You say that your door is open. You say that of Steve Buckley's is open as well, particularly as regards the nurses. But is it potentially possible that Rishi Sunak closed that door and put his foot up against it when he stopped your boss from giving nurses a one-off payment that could have brought an end to these strikes?
No, I don't think that is the case. I mean, where you're right is that the NHS has a fixed budget. That was set at the autumn statement. We had an extra £3.3 billion a year, and we've got important issues to tackle, including the COVID backlog of around 7 million patients.
Did the Prime Minister or did the Prime Minister not block a one-off payment?
No, I haven't seen any specific detail around one-off payments. But what I would say is this: our door is open to discuss with the unions anything relating to working conditions. What we can't do, Niall, is go back into reopening the pay award, which was set by the recommendation by the independent pay review body, whose recommendations we accepted in full. Sure. They will now be looking to next year as independent pay review body recommendations to kick in from April. And let's not forget, we're 3/4 of the way through this year already, and any extra percent over the £1,400 or average 4.72% equates to £700 million.
Sure. We are also, midway through a kind of a period of extended strikes, and perhaps people might want to get things sorted out. I have to raise something though. Rishi Sunak this morning, giving a rather interesting interview to the Mail, in which he kind of talks about Sunakism, his kind of political philosophy, and he says this, which I think will cause people to stop and stare. The first thing Mr. Sunak says that I want to deliver for people is peace of mind. Peace of mind is also about knowing that public services like the NHS are going to be there for you and your family when you need them. And he then goes on to talk about waiting lists. I mean, is Mr. Sunak taking the mickey?
No, not at all. And if you look at the most recent autumn statement, it was exactly that, public services that were prioritised, whether it was the extra £8 billion into health and social care or the additional funding into education. That's exactly
the NHS is going to be there for you and your family when you need them. They're not right now for many, many people because of this government's refusal to negotiate on pay.
Well, look, we have an independent pay review body recommendation, which we've accepted in full. It's important that you have that process. And let's not forget that last year we had the same process where the recommendation was 3% when the wider, for NHS staff, when the wider public sector was frozen. That was at the time three times higher than inflation. This year we've accepted those recommendations in full, but it's important to point out, because you reference nurses and paramedics, but actually what we're talking about is the entire Agenda for Change workforce, which is 1.24 million people who work within the NHS. They're on the same Agenda for Change contract. So any change, that's why it costs £700 million for every 1%. The ask of the RCN of some 19.2% equates to £10 billion. Now,
I will, however, note that at regular points over the past 12 years, this Conservative government has ignored or added to the recommendations of a variety of independent peer review bodies. I do, however, I'm sorry, I know you're pushed for time and I want to let you get away, but I just need to ask you, Sky News has been running an investigation this morning about the Hunter Combe Group, serious allegations of failures in care. We were first reported on this in October. Now, again, another 30 patients have come forward with legitimate complaints, it would appear. What is your department going to be doing about that?
Well, I've seen your report. It's totally unacceptable. And if I were a patient or a family member of a patient, I would rightly want answers to that too. I know, having spoken with my colleague, Minister Maria Caulfield, who has responsibility in this area, she takes it incredibly seriously. And I know both NHS England and the CQC will want to look at this very closely indeed.
Minister, it's great to have you on this programme this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Let's have a quick look at the weather. The Met Office forecasting that next year, can you believe it, going to be hotter than 2022, one of the warmest on record. And after all the snow and ice, it is practically barbecue weather outside right now. Actually, I have, in Scotland, barbecued in colder temperatures than this. Let's get the view of Sky's meteorologist, Joe Robinson, joining us from a very dark and moody-looking Oxfordshire this morning. Joe, just bring us up to date. What is the weather going to be looking at as we get into Christmas? And tell us just a little bit about that exceptionally hot next year that we're going to have to look forward to.
Well, yes, the Met Office have released that information that they're forecasting a central estimate of 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial period average. So the last 10 consecutive years we've seen, or that including that year would make it 10 consecutive years that we've seen temperatures 1 degree over the 1 degree above pre-industrial times. So yes, we've got that information, and we've had La Nina that's meant to help cool things slightly, so that is likely to wane as we go into 2023. So that's why we've got that figure slightly higher than what we're expecting for 2022. But for now, looking at the weather as we go towards the Christmas period, we are looking at signs of Arctic air moving back in, so there is some uncertainty of how far south that will sink. So yes, need to keep an eye on the forecast over the next few days.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So we're looking at some rain across eastern England this morning. That will clear and leave most places fine, dry, plenty of sunshine today. But there will be some showers across the northwest, some strong winds there too. So blustery showers there could bring some thunderstorms as well. But mainly dry elsewhere after that rain clears the eastern parts. And we're looking at highs today, generally around 10 or 11 degrees Celsius in the south. So in that sunshine and lighter winds in the south, it shouldn't feel too bad. Then as we go through tonight, we will see further rain moving in. That will then clear tomorrow morning, and then we'll see showers continuing in the northwest again on Wednesday, and then yes, all change on Thursday with Arctic air potentially moving into the north.
Now, a health minister has told the programme the government is not willing to negotiate nurses' pay for this year. Will Quinn said his and the Health Secretary Steve Barclay's doors were open for discussions over working conditions, but that pay is not up for discussion at this stage.
The largest issue is around handover delays, and that is largely about bed occupancy levels within hospitals, flow within hospitals, and discharge into adult social care. They are all issues that we are tackling, but we're also building up resilience within the Ambulance Trust too. An extra £150 million, an extra £20 million invested in the fleet. And as I say, we are investing in more paramedics too. And my door and the door of the Secretary of State is open when it comes to discussing those issues around patient safety and working conditions for staff. What we are not willing to negotiate is reopening the pay for this year, which is part of the independent pay review body recommendations, which the government accepted in full.
Now let's get the view of our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen. I mean, you were listening to the interview with the Minister. What did you make?
Neil, two things jumped out at me. The first is the fact that he said that the government's message to the unions in their meeting this lunchtime would be that Category 1 and 2 calls need to be answered by ambulance workers even during the strike tomorrow. So Category 2 being not an immediate threat to life, but something that could be, a heart attack or a stroke or sepsis, something that requires urgent attention. He said that's about 50% of all calls. So that's what they want the ambulance workers to be answering, 50% of all calls. It doesn't sound as if every ambulance trust has agreed to that. So that is a real concern for ministers, trying to get that nailed down, and they are really keen to get that done this afternoon. Whether they will be able to negotiate that with the unions remains to be seen. The second thing was, with all this discussion about whether there had been suggestions in government of whether to give the nurses a one-off payment to perhaps resolve this strike, he suggested that the government was going to hold firm on this year's pay, but that potentially next year's pay might be where they find some compromise. The government has already called for evidence, because they get all this evidence in for the pay review bodies to decide what the next year's pay rise will be from April. Perhaps that is where a resolution will be found. But it sounds as if the government are very much standing firm on this year's pay, and that will mean a lot of disruption, not just over Christmas, but into the new year as well.
Thanks, Tamara. The Conservative MP, Bob Stewart, has admitted he made a mistake after being caught on camera telling a human rights activist to go back to Bahrain. He was being confronted about a trip paid for by the Bahraini government ahead of elections in the country last year.
Bob Stewart! For how much did you sell yourself to the Bahraini regime?
I didn't. Now you shut up, you stupid man.
You are stupid. How much? Did you accept any money from the Bahraini regime?
You're taking money off my country. Go away.
The campaigner, Syed Al-Wadi, has since complained to the Conservative Party. Mr Stewart told Sky News he had been goaded into a response and insisted that he was not a racist. He'd also stressed that he'd never taken a penny from authorities in Bahrain. Some of the other stories making the news this morning. British Airways has apologised after flights between the United States and the UK experienced severe disruption. The airline said the delays were due to a technical issue. Some passengers described waiting on planes on the runway for hours before being moved back to the airport. The government is to sue a firm linked to Conservative peer Baroness Mone in a row over the supply of personal protective equipment during the pandemic. Ministers say that medical gowns supplied by PPE MedPro did not comply with the specification in the contract. In a statement, the company said the claim would be rigorously defended. The Bank of England has unveiled the design of the King Charles II banknotes. The King's image will appear on the £5, £10, £20 and £50 notes, with no other changes to existing design. The new notes are expected to enter circulation by mid-2024. Christmas in Ukraine is going to look very different this year as the country marks its first festive season under the shadow of Russia's invasion. Back in March, I spoke to Ksenia Kizniak, who movingly told us about how she fled Kyiv with her 2 daughters and her husband. She shared this video of the moment her husband returned to Ukraine to fight.
Только не свались, пожалуйста, это сзади чуть... Не, это самое не свалилось. Пока.
Well, Senia has since returned to the capital with her daughters, and I'm very pleased to say that she joins us now live from Kyiv. Senia, good to see you this morning, and Merry Christmas. I hope you're well.
Oh, hi, Niall. Thank you so much. Yes, we're doing fine, thank you, and Merry Christmas as well.
I'm glad to see that the tree is up, but of course, I suspect that Christmas in Kyiv right now is going to be slightly different to the Christmas that I'll have when I get back home to Scotland.
Yeah, it's quite different. We have a lot of blackouts. We don't have this illumination in the streets, and usually we have the lights down. But still, the people are celebrating. They're decorating their trees. They're trying to share what they have, and the mood is really cheerful. Although it's different, this cheerfully is different.
Yeah, well, explain that to me, because obviously you're beaming away. As you know, it is Christmas time, and I'm sure that the girls are getting very, very excited. Santa still makes his way, you know, no matter the conditions, of course. But you know, there have been any number of those drone and rocket attacks, particularly coming very, very close to where you are right now. There are the power cuts that I imagine will be an issue for you and many, many others there as well. Given all of that, how do you keep a smile on your face?
Probably because I feel that I'm in the right place right now. I'm just there where I'm supposed to be, in my city, in my country, in my homeland, with my citizens, my fellow citizens. And, you know, it's pretty amazing because we really have this tragic and scary and dangerous situation, but still everyone is so standing so good because, we know we're unbreakable. You know, we have this feeling of gathering, this feeling of being together on one side, on the right side, and people are so they're ready to help each other. You can just go into any shop and say, "Hi, can I charge my phone?" And everyone says, "Yes, sure you can." We have these generators on the streets where all the time because shops and restaurants and some cafes, they need to have electricity, and they use these generators. And somehow we get used to it. Yes, like yesterday we didn't have power during the whole day. We were cut it off. This morning as well. I'm on my mobile connection. I don't have electricity in my flat in my apartment right now.
Oh, right.
But still, we feel good. You know, we feel like we're doing something right, and maybe that's what helps us.
How are the girls doing? How have the girls coped since we last spoke? Because obviously you have made the decision to go back to Kyiv, but when we first talked, you know, you had just, you know, you were waving goodbye to your husband as he headed off to join the military effort. I mean, how have they been over the past few months?
Well, we made a decision to come back to Kyiv in September because there was a question of school year and girls had to go to some school somewhere and we had to decide where. And we came back here because, yeah, we felt so miserable when we were somewhere else. We wanted to come home. And there's a lot of people who stay in Kyiv, like most of them stay here because it feels much safer than like those cities which are on the east or on the south, no, not south, which are close to the front line. But also we have missile attacks and drone attacks here. Still, somehow we adapt, you know, somehow we get used to it. It feels much scarier when you look at it from somewhere else. But when you're inside, you have so much energy to get through it, so much energy to stand with your family, with your neighbors, with your citizens. It gives a lot of this superpower, you know, inside superpower.
Senia, tell us then just a little bit about how your husband has been getting on. Obviously, we saw that very moving bit of video when he was saying goodbye to you and the girls, and has been serving now for quite some time. How's he doing?
He's doing fine right now. He's near the Bakhmut. It's a really hot spot on the front line. We've seen each other maybe in October, we had 2 days to meet each other with the girls and me. And right now we're out of connection with him because he can't, like, he has no ability to call us for a few days already, but we were hoping he's fine. We believe that. So we are proud of him. We're totally proud of him. We're totally supporting him. We're making some, we're buying some these gadgets for him for the drones which are flying. So we're doing good, pretty good, I think.
Given the circumstances, I'd say you're doing brilliantly, Xenia. But you must, whilst you are incredibly proud of him, and I'm sure the girls are as well, you must be in a constant state of, nervousness about what is happening in various parts of your country and where he is right now.
Yes, that's true, because I've got all of this scripts of what could happen to him and what could happen to us if something happens to him, and I'm like rolling it in my head every day. But it's his decision, and it's our decision as well. This is what we supposed to do, what all of us supposed to do, he and us. And all of our country, like we didn't want this to have this choice and to have this way, but it's what happens to us, and you have to take this. You have no other way.
What then? Because of course, Christmas, the new year, it's a time for regeneration. It's a time for planning ahead. It's time for making resolutions and a little bit of hope for the future. I wonder, given what has been happening to your country for most of this year, whether you have much hope for 2023.
Oh God, I'm just trying not to think about it, actually, because when we're looking like what happened, we had this. Everyone had the COVID, the coronavirus, the lockdown. Then we had war, and we're having it right now. So we're just hoping it's not going to get worse. That would be okay for us, really. We want to win. We want to have victory. That's our main goal and main wish we all make under the Christmas tree. Yeah.
Well, that is the main thing, isn't it? We're a handful of days away from Christmas Day. Santa is getting the sleigh loaded up already. Just tell me, what is your Christmas Day like in Kyiv?
Well, usually when I wake up, I'm just trying to turn on the light to understand, is there any electricity or no? So mostly I don't, but I mean, it's okay. We got used to it. We have power banks, we have candles. And I was born in Kyiv, which in early 19th, it was pretty much the same. We had a lot of power downs. My girls go to school, which is next door to us. They somehow study with their teachers. If there's an air alert, teachers take them to the shelter, to the subway. I don't go to the subway usually because I stay here in my corridor, which is we have this 2 walls rule because if you stay in some area where there's no windows and which is behind 2 walls, it's safer than if you stay like I'm here right now next to the window. So if there's any missile attacks, we go to the corridor behind 2 walls. If we see that there's a lot of we check news line to understand if there a big missile attack or drone attack. If it's big, then we can go to subway also or to stay. We just can decide to stay home in the corridor. We have a small shelter here there. Something like that. Then if I see that the electricity is on, I'm trying to get all my houseworking done really quickly, to wash dishes, to do everything. I don't know. It feels like we're in some kind of weird reality. I'm also trying to remember it really good. I'm trying to write down some of my day life thoughts just to remember it, because it's a really strange part of my life, really strange year.
I can imagine. Well, Senior, I really hope that you and the girls have a wonderful Christmas time and that your husband gets back to you all soon so that the family can celebrate together. But from all of us here, look, wishing you, your family and all of your friends and relations all the very best for 2023. Senior, you take care.
Thank you so much. Have a Merry Christmas as well.
Time for the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
After an exceptionally mild start to the week, temperatures falling closer to the average for the time of year. Overnight rain will lie over East Anglia and the southeast this morning. Elsewhere, mostly dry and bright, with temperatures in the mid-single figures. It will be blustery in the north and west, with showers that may turn heavy at times. The skies will brighten in the southeast this afternoon to leave a largely dry day, with showers running into Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. With us this morning to review the papers, the entrepreneur Kate Hardcastle and the editor-in-chief of National World Cities, Nancy Fielder. Lovely to see you both again. And Nancy, we're to you front. It's the front of the first, and it's the front of the Times. And this is ambulance strike due tomorrow, and concerns that some very, very sick people might not be able to get an ambulance.
Yes, this is what happens when people who don't want to strike in care roles are forced to strike because the government won't listen to them. Because we've got an NHS that, for several reasons, but one of the big one being that people don't want to work there, they leave, and there aren't enough people being recruited back because it's a really difficult place to work. This is what happens. But let's also reflect back quickly on headlines we've had for several years in the newspapers. People have been denied full NHS services and full ambulance services because the service is in crisis. So the strikes are inevitably going to make it worse, but they don't have to have these strikes. The government has chosen to go head-to-head, told lies around the economics of whether we can afford pay rises. And I think the country is on the side of the NHS workers, and it's awful that people will possibly die because the government won't negotiate on this and won't take serious action.
Yeah, and certainly when I put that very question to the Minister, the Health Minister this morning, he would not be drawn into making that explicit statement. I want to go across the Atlantic. Kate, you've got the story inside The Guardian today, and this US Congressional Committee actually recommending some pretty significant criminal charges against Donald Trump.
It's definitely a milestone in that we've got a point where this committee that has been going for 18 months, they've had over 1,000 interviews, has reached the recommendation that Trump should face charges. But I think if we go back 2 years to that very infamous tweet where I think it was exactly maybe 2 years to the day, Donald Trump went out and said it will be wild because this very frustrated president, this desperate president was wanting to change the outcome of that election, suggesting that there'd been fraud. It's been quite the journey so far. And I think what we have to understand from all of the detailed report that's come through is there's still a long way to go before we know if this actually manifests itself into those charges, what will happen then. And in the meantime, we still have Mr. Trump, who has announced that he will run for 2024 with the very possibility of still doing so. Of course, everything is down to the American public and how they react to what might unfold from there.
Nancy, we're going to skip ahead a couple of stories because I've got it written down on my list as Mail, page 3, hobnobs. You've got 30 seconds. Take it away.
This is a vital piece of research from the British Medical Journal that hobnobs is the biscuit that survives longest if you dunk it. And I was suggesting Christmas week, every single viewer goes out and tries this because I think we all need a hobnob to cheer us up after a grim round of news.
Do you know what? Well, Kate, you were shaking your head there. You're not a hobnob fan, are you?
I absolutely love dunking a biscuit in my brew, believe me, but hobnobs, they leave residue in the bottom, Neil. It's not nice.
This is all getting a little bit too redolent of a Peter Kay routine for my liking. So do you know what? We're going to leave it there.